Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the James Dickens versus Anthony Cacace fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content, any videos you want to see from me, and I will try my best to get out there for you guys. I appreciate all the support, of course, which I've had with it so far, and you can also use the Patreon for betting tips as well. Again, I appreciate the support. The link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one, and this is a good fight. It's on St. Patrick's Day weekend. Realistically, it's the ideal event to have on St. Patrick's Day weekend in Ireland, and I'm not surprised it's been made. I mean, obviously neither Cacace or Jazza Dickens are technically from the Republic of Ireland, but Cacace, of course, is from Northern Ireland, so, you know, it makes for a good Irish fight, even though this is in Dublin and he's from Belfast. But, you know, again, this is a good fight to have in Ireland where the fans are going to get behind it with an undercard pretty full of good Irish talent, and it's a good event and it's an easy one to make with two signed Queensberry fighters. And I mean, Cacace, of course, is the former IBF world champion, and Dickens is the current world champion. So again, it makes complete sense. Of course, Cacace never lost his belt in the ring. He vacated the belt due to, in his words, wanting more lucrative fights than fighting at the time Sugar Nunez, who was signed with Matchroom and who was his mandatory, and was definitely a risky fight. Of course, Nunez, a very power punching guy. Of course, we've just seen him lose to Navarrete, but at the time he was coming through and looking really destructive, and you know, it was a risky fight for Cacace. Cacace definitely got some stick for vacating the belt. It definitely seemed like he was ducking it to an extent, but again, he was, in his words, trying to go for them more lucrative fights. And could you argue he's had more lucrative fights since then? I mean, I'm not too sure. The Warrington fight probably did pay well, but that was kind of before the whole Nunez situation. It was more just the Lee Wood fight, which he main evented, I suppose, and it was a big fight in the UK, but hasn't really grown his kind of stature worldwide. And this fight, again, is a chance for him to become a two-time world champion without losing a fight. Well, at least without losing a fight in that period. But, you know, at the same time, is it, you know, going to be growing his kind of worldwide presence again? No, but I'm sure he's not really too bothered about that because, again, being a two-time world champion is, you know, a very big feat in itself. But, you know, if he'd have gone down the Eduardo Nunez route, where could he have been now? Again, we guess we'll never know. But it definitely would have been a good fight. Maybe we could see Cacace versus Nunez at some point. But again, you know, this is a very good card. And for Cacace, he showed his world level ability as well as showing just a great performance to be able to win last time out very well and kind of dominatingly against Lee Wood. And of course, that's aged pretty well with Lee Wood going and making pretty comfortable work of Josh Warrington, basically just dominating him with nicely timed work on the back foot. Obviously, he's gotten a win versus Josh Warrington as well, which was a pretty comfortable dominating victory as well. But he also, you know, of course, got that big win where he was the underdog coming in on a big undercard, and he was able to disrupt the odds and go out there and win against Cordina, which again was a very impressive victory against Cordina, who at the time was looking pretty, you know, dominating and unbeatable to an extent by a lot of the other, especially kind of British and Irish kind of fighters. There wasn't really anybody around that really looked like they could challenge Cordina bar Cacace. And I mean, Cacace had a rough time. You know, he's had the IBO belt, but he's had a rough time of actually getting more significant matchups. He'd had, you know, a couple of decent wins prior, but, you know, since his loss, which he had earlier on in his career, he was really kind of rebuilding for quite a while, and so he really wasn't getting these opportunities. And I mean, he is older than that of Dickens for this fight. He's 37 whilst Dickens is 34. So again, Dickens has been able to go and have a lot more fights and achieve more in his career than Cacace has really been able to. You know, they've been a pro for a similar amount of time, but through injuries and time out, and, you know, like I say, having a loss and then having to rebuild and not getting as fortunate of opportunities as what Dickens may have had. It's just not come as easy for Cacace. But again, when he had the opportunity come to him and that Cordina fight, of course he was able to go out there and, you know, make very impressive work. And Cordina has basically since been forced to move up into the lightweight division because that's where he felt more comfortable after losing and being kind of physically dominated by that of Cacace. And I mean, going for Cordina, Warrington, and Wood in the UK, they're basically the best super featherweights around that we've got proven. Of course, now we've got the likes of Ryan Garner and Josh Padley as well about, but for the moment, other than Dickens, who at the time was in the featherweight division, he has beaten a lot of the top UK super featherweight names. Dickens, realistically, has had a bit of a true underdog story as well. I mean, Cacace's had an underdog story, coming and being able to beat Cordina from, being what was the underdog for that fight. But Dickens has had that, a lot in his career, in his past few fights especially, to get to becoming a world champion that not long ago had fought down in the featherweight division for the IBO belt against Hector Souza and got shockingly knocked out bad, to be able to come back and become a world champion in the division above. I doubt he ever would have thought that was a possibility, especially right kind of shortly after getting knocked out by Souza. It was such a dramatic knockout, and it was on quite a smaller show in, I think it was Dubai. And yeah, I mean, Sosa's never really been known for being a power puncher either. He's gone on to lose twice since. It was just a shocking moment where he was winning the fight and he just got too comfortable and he got caught with a big shot and got really badly knocked out. And Dickens, it's kind of always been the case with his career. He's a good fighter. He's a very good fighter. He's got a lot of skills that, really lean to him, and he's a very well-rounded fighter. But he can just get knocked out when things aren't going too well, or not even when things aren't going too well. He can just get knocked out kind of out of nowhere, or just get stopped, or be winning a fight and then get stopped. It's it's just something that's kind of been with Dickens, where he can get hurt and he does get hurt. And Dickens versus Sosa, that happened, and that was just out of nowhere. He's not had it quite that bad, I don't believe, throughout his career, but he's also had losses to Galahad twice. He's been stopped, I think, 3 out of his 4 losses. Again, I'm not entirely know if that's a correct stat, but still, I know it's majority of his losses have come via stoppage defeat. And again, it's just not a good look compared to Cacace, who has lost before but hasn't been stopped. And again, it's just not a good look in my opinion. And I mean, to be fair, after getting shockingly KO'd by Sosa, it did kind of look like it might be the end of his career. I mean, coming back from that is going to take a lot, or he's going to have to, really rebuild well. And I mean, it wasn't really that long ago before he got stopped by Galahad for the second time fighting for the world title. But instead, he moved up in weight again, had a few comeback fights, and then he fought Zelfa Barrett in his hometown as well. So again, this is what you kind of have to go through to be able to rebuild, and many fighters just aren't able to do it. But he rebuilt, he was able to beat Zelfa Barrett pretty comfortably as well in his hometown, of Zelfa Barrett's hometown, and again, that was impressive. He then got a random opportunity, which did kind of come out of nowhere really, and he was just kind of, from the sounds of it, right place, right time, I suppose, to an extent, and was able to have that opportunity in that fight, to fight an undefeated former Russian Olympic Games, I think, gold medalist in Batyrgaziev in Turkey for the WBA interim belt. And I mean, Batyrgaziev was going to be kind of the home fight, even though he's a Russian fighter. He had, I think, quite a big fan base out in Turkey for that fight, and it was a shocking thing to see him get KO'd. I mean, it must have felt so sweet for Dickens to be able to go out there and return the KO as the underdog instead of being the favourite and being the one KO'd. Again, it was very impressive. He, really went out there and just caused what was a big upset. Batyrgaziev had not long gone and gotten a good win against Jono Carroll, who of course is on this card as well, and I'm going to be speaking about in a minute. But again, to be able to go out there and stop and KO a guy like that, I mean, Dickens has always had a good level of power, but it's never really been something in which you can rely on or really expect from him. And yeah, it was just very impressive. And when Lamont Roach decided to move up, Dickens, interim champion, got elevated to full champion. And I mean, like I mentioned, despite him fighting pro since 2011, he's had, like I say, he's only 34 years of age. He's had plenty of good tests in Lee Wood. That's another good win, which, they both share. The Rigondeaux fight, was a fight which he did lose, but again, was a good name to have on his resume. Galahad twice, again, he lost both of them, but again, good names to have on his resume. He's had, others as well, but he's just always been around and been accepting kind of every challenge, really. And he's just been, like I say, all over fighting. And I think now he's just been signed with Queensberry. Again, I might be wrong, but again, I think it's a good signing and it makes sense. And of course, he's a world champion. And like I say, with him only being 34 years of age, unless we see him, get knocked out badly, which could possibly happen in this fight, could happen at some point. But for the moment, we're riding a high with Jazza Dickens. And For the kind of fight stats, of course, Cacace, 37 years of age, he's 5'10", and that is going to probably play a significant factor in this fight, with Dickens being only 5'5", with a 63-inch reach. Obviously, Batyrgaziev had them kind of long levers and was able to catch Dickens with it quite a lot in their fight, but he was able to get it past it, and then was able to still get his jab through, and was able to still get his work through, to then lead on to him being able to stop Batyrgaziev. Not saying that's going to happen with Cacace, but again, you never do know, but there is, like I say, that kind of significant difference between the height and the reach of these two. To speak about both fighters individually, though, Cacace as a fighter, I think he's got a real good snap to his punches. You can see him, often trying to dig his feet into the canvas and try and, really kind of rip them body punches, and he does turn and twist into his punches quite nice. He's got a nice technique in what he throws. He's physically strong, you can see that strength in him, and he's always trying to push you back and trying to, not be the one to be on the back foot, and he is typically able to have success with that. And I mean, of course, Cordina learned that the hard way, and Dickens, I think Dickens has moved up into the super featherweight division well, and I think it's, looks good on him, and he looked good in that fight against Batyrgaziev with the size difference. He looked like the bigger guy in there, but Cacace is definitely going to be the more, physically stronger super featherweight, I believe, in this fight. He punches all over. He's got good body work. Of course, Lee Wood had to learn that the hard way. He lets his hands go, and if he can back you up, he will have, success letting his hands go a lot. He throws hooks from afar, and he's able to land them. Sometimes I don't like fighters that do that, because they can, overcommit and overreach, but it seems to work pretty well from Cacace, kind of mixing up the distance of his hooks. He finds space in close to work by, being the physically stronger guy to be able to create that space and, be able to work. He has got a swiping kind of fast hook that he uses a lot as well. He's probably got faster hands, in my opinion, than that of Dickens. He mixes the distance well as well. I think he was able to do that well against Wood, just not just being in front of him the entire fight. And he's strong-willed as well. That's something that's definite about him. He's aggressive, he's strong-willed. He's going to be trying to, really digging deep. He's got, negative-wise, not the best defensive head movement. We haven't really seen that much of him using his head movement much. I think Dickens' head movement is better. His comfort boxing on the back foot isn't really all that much. We haven't really seen him boxing on the back foot too much. He's got quite a tense upper body, whereas Dickens is much more of a looser type of fighter. So we're not really going to see, like, say, him kind of leaning on the back foot, trying to use that upper body movement to get out of shots, really. He doesn't really deal with paired jabs that well, and Dickens can use that. When he fights from a southpaw position, both of these guys can fight from a southpaw position, but I just don't think he's as good from a southpaw position. Cacace, I think he's better from orthodox, and he can start overly switching between the two quite a lot, and that's just not really something which is the best in my opinion, because you've got to have, a set base. It's okay to be able to switch, but just knowing when to do it is very difficult. He's got a wide stance quite often. He doesn't cut off the ring the best, in my opinion. He often is just following instead. He doesn't pair up his jab that much. He leaves his guard quite open, and he leaves gaps when he's throwing as well. Dickens, as a fighter, he has his hands high. He doesn't leave as many openings, in my opinion, as that of Cacace. He's comfortable, sometimes overly comfortable, and of course that's where we've seen him be knocked out before. He can work close or at a mid-range and be pretty comfortable at both. He can fight on the front foot and the back foot and be pretty comfortable at both. Probably, to be fair, better on the front foot, but we've seen him fight on the back foot and still have success. He shortens up his punches nicely himself. He, like I say, I think, come up to the weight division well. He holds his ground well as well, and he was able to do that in the early kind of parts against Batyrgaziev and really kind of stamp his authority in that fight. He's willing to be physical as well, which would be interesting to see if that plays out at any point with Cacace. He's willing to bring the pressure as well if he's allowed to. He gets his head off the line quite well. It's not amazing. I mean, he still does get caught by jabs pretty consistent, but that's just because he's really trying to get his jab through. But he does have his head off the line quite often, and he does know when to turn up the power as well. As soon as he wanted to turn up the power against Batyrgaziev, he did that, and it had success, and he was able to go out there and knock him out. So he does know when to turn up the power, and know when to strike, I suppose, when the iron's hot, and he did that again well to be able to win his last fight. Negatives about him, of course, he's been hurt badly. We've kind of talked about this. That is a big kryptonite if Cacace is able to land the shot, and then we'll have to wait and see. He can be caught by long jabs as well, like I mentioned. He's a bit more of a slower starter, in my opinion, than that of Cacace. So Cacace, if he starts well, he might be able to win a few of the early rounds. He's not got as faster hands, in my opinion, and he's not got as much snap into his natural kind of punches. He can stay in range too long, and that can lead him to getting caught. He don't create or use as many angles as that of Cacace, but he does move off well defensively, and I think that has better defensive footwork than that of Cacace when he uses it. He doesn't throw too many, multiples in combinations, more than just kind of two shots. He can be caught by the inside uppercuts. He can be too comfortable, like I mentioned, and if he isn't allowed the centre of the ring, he can work on the back foot, but I think he is the most comfortable on the centre ring, but he can work on the back foot as well. Who do I think is going to win this fight? I think it's actually a really good matchup. I'm going to go with James Dickens to win the fight via majority decision. I think it's going to be a very close competitive fight, but I think Cacace leaves more gaps, and as long as Dickens doesn't really get hurt by Cacace's punches, which it could happen, if Dickens keeps, very disciplined, keeps his hands high and keeps boxing and moving, keeps trying to have his head off the line, he probably is going to have to deal with fighting on the back foot. But if he mixes moments when he, puts in power punches, he could catch it, Cacace off guard when Cacace is, leaving gaps. And I think they could, catch him with shots. And like I say, Dickens has shown that he can deal with a long-reached, jabber who, isn't as fluid and as comfortable as him. And I think Cacace kind of is that. And like I say, I think Dickens is actually going to be able to go out there, defend his title, and win via what will probably be a close decision, because I think Cacace's work rate and will to win and aggressiveness will, definitely help him to win a couple of the rounds. And again, he might be able to start quicker than Dickens, but I think Dickens in the long run will be able to get his work going and get comfortable and, like I say, pick moments when to attack Cacace, and I think he'll be able to do that and perhaps frustrate Cacace as well. Who he can go on to fight next? I mean, if it's a great fight, then Cacace again, possibly, but I don't know if it'll be, that amazing of a fight. If not, I mean, Hayato Satsumi was meant to fight Jazza Dickens, and I mean, that would have probably paid well because it was on a big, Ring Magazine show, but this is definitely a bigger occasion for Jazza Dickens, so he's probably glad that this fight is happening instead of the Satsumi one, but that fight might end up happening again at some point. But now with the whole thing with Queensberry not really working with, Seller and, the Ring Magazine events most likely anymore, it might not happen with, Dickens, of course, being signed to Queensberry. Elner Samerov is another Russian fighter who's interim champion in the super featherweight division, WBA interim champion, and so that could happen. He could end up going back out to another European country in Turkey or Russia or somewhere like that and getting a fight against him possibly. But I think Dickens deserves to have a few more, or at least a fight in Liverpool where he is the main attraction and the main attention. I feel like we haven't had that with Dickens in a long time, and I think he's given a lot to the sport, so I think he really does deserve that. So maybe if we have a Samedov, he could come over and fight Dickens in his own country, in his own back garden, instead of him going over there. Again, that would be quite nice to see. To speak about the, I think, co-main event on this card of Pierce O'Leary versus Maxi Hughes. This is for the vacant IBO World Super Lightweight title. I'm going to be speaking about the two IBO World vacant title fights on this card. And, I mean, there hasn't really been a downgrade in opponent, in my opinion, for this fight. For Pierce O'Leary, as he's taken, a proper step up here in Maxi Hughes as a fighter. I mean, obviously Maxi Hughes is coming in on, I think, 2-3 weeks notice. It is pretty short notice for him to step in, and I think he's moving up in weight division for this fight as well. We've seen him more recently in the lightweight division, so he's actually stepping up for the first time in his career, I believe. And, I mean, he was meant to fight Mark Chamberlain. I think that would have been, in my opinion, it could have been an easier fight. I mean, Mark Chamberlain showed a lot of heart and desire against Jack Rafferty to go and get a draw, but, Mark Chamberlain has lost to lesser opponents than that of Maxi Hughes. Maxi Hughes is coming off a loss against Usmanov, but still, he's a top name. That was a world title eliminator, that fight, and, Hughes has been able to get wins against, some real top guys as well. Cully being one of the names who's on this card, he was able to go out there, and been able to get a good run going before the loss against Usmanov last time. And so again, he is a real top name who's proven at world level. Of course, he's given problems to Kambosos Jr., where he, arguably won that fight. Obviously, he went to lose badly to Zepeda afterwards, but I think he's a real tough test. And again, O'Leary has only really beaten a couple of known names on the UK scene, in Dillon to win the European title, which he has now vacated because I don't think that Queensberry wanted the John Fernandez fight for O'Leary, so they've vacated it and allowed Fernandez to fight for the belt, because I don't think Dalton Smith wanted to fight Fernandez either. But O'Leary also has names like Foley and Batyrgaziev, who was a good win at the time, but Batyrgaziev hadn't really been that tested. He did knock him out O'Leary though, which was nice, but he hasn't fought an opponent who's fought properly at a world level, just like Hughes has, and hasn't got anywhere near that kind of level of experience, in my opinion. And, he definitely did have certain, issues and took punches against Dillon, so it'll be interesting to see how many punches he takes against Hughes, and Hughes is just a very skilled fighter who's very underrated, in my opinion. Of course, Hughes is coming off a loss to Usmanov in a close fight out in Dubai on an away show. Again, it's always going to be hard to win an away show, but I think he did lose that fight. Usmanov lost quite a few of the early rounds versus Hughes when he was boxing at a mid-range, but Usmanov started to work in a bit more and started to be able to close the distance, and realised that what Hughes was landing wasn't really overly powerful. It was just quite disrupting. So he was able to start getting and working in close more, and he was having more and more success in the fight when he was doing that. So again, I do feel like he did win that one, but again, it was still a very competitive fight to the end. Hughes has shown that he can beat and contest some high level opponents more than, like I mentioned, Chamberlain has shown, more than O'Leary has shown. The likes of Kambosos Jr., Keith Galahad, he has a win against Jono Carroll, who's also on this card, who's been a top name and fought for a world title. And like I say, he was on a good run post losing to Zepeda before he fought Usmanov. So it will definitely be a fight to prove if O'Leary is ready to go to world level. I would definitely say this is a world level gatekeeper type fight for O'Leary. Of course, Hughes is going up in weight in this fight, and I don't know if that's going to be too good for him. I think he's good at the lightweight division. I think he holds the weight better there and he moves better. And again, with him moving up, it's just going to mean that the people he's facing have more and more power. So again, that could be risky. I mean, Zepeda was able to kind of just walk through him and really dominate him, and to show kind of that pressure and that physical strength to be able to bully him and have success. So again, I don't know if moving up for Maxi Hughes on short notice is going to be the best, but we'll have to wait and see. Of course, Hughes is a very skilled fighter at a mid-range, moving and picking off his punches, point scoring and disrupting the rhythm of you. And again, it will be something in which O'Leary hasn't had to deal with, but if you can get in close with him, he does struggle leaving many gaps and not being able to push you off or slow you down, but he does know how to make his opponents work, and O'Leary is definitely going to have to probably work and deal with getting a lot of punches, in this fight. O'Leary does have the more power, and he's the more natural at this weight, of course. We've seen him struggle against good power in the past to Hughes. O'Leary puts on pressure coming forwards, but doesn't really move his head that much. He can load up leaving times for Hughes to land, but again, he's the more powerful out of the two. He's, a pretty good aggressive fighter who does land pretty consistently and is pretty accurate as well. I'm gonna go with a Pierce O'Leary win via TKO in round 10. I think Hughes is gonna box well at a mid-range and really disrupt O'Leary in the early to mid rounds, but I think O'Leary is just going to keep coming, and he probably can rely on his power a bit, and I just don't think Maxi Hughes moving up in division is going to be good for him, and I think it is going to result in O'Leary showing his power and his strength more superior at this weight, and again going out there and getting a late stoppage where Maxi Hughes, might leave them more gaps in close. He does leave gaps in close, and against, like I say, real powerful punches, he can get moved about, and I think O'Leary will do that, and like I say, be able to go out there and get a late stoppage. Again, Hughes is coming in on short notice. I think it's going to be a competitive fight for as long as it lasts, but I think O'Leary is going to go out there and get a stoppage against him, and like I say, get a real big statement victory for the first time in his career. And then we can go on to fight next. I mean, the Chamberlain fight might still happen. I want to see Chamberlain fight Rafferty, but Rafferty versus O'Leary would be a good fight as well. Or something like Jermaine Ortiz, that could be a real step up for Pierce O'Leary. And Jermaine Ortiz is coming off his loss, which was quite a bad loss to Keyshawn Davis, which wasn't for a world title. So, that could be a real step up to then show that Pierce O'Leary is ready. I don't know, Pierce O'Leary's struggled to get the real kind of attention from the big names. When you have the likes of Dalton Smith and Adam Azim around in the division, it's been difficult for Pierce O'Leary to stand out enough to be able to actually, get the other British names to notice him and other bigger names to notice him. If he beats Maxi Hughes via stoppage, he might start to do that. And again, I wouldn't mind, a kind of actual good real world level opponent who's not had many losses on his resume. That could be the next fight in my opinion. Moving on to the final fight in which I'm going to be speaking about on this card, it is Jono Carroll versus Colm Murphy for the vacant IBO World Super Featherweight title. Of course, Anthony Cacace's old belt. This is a surprising fight to see in my opinion, with Murphy I feel taking a big step up with both of these fighters, of course, fighting for Cacace's former belt in the IBO belt. Carroll has been all over the place fighting, so it's a rare homecoming here to see him fight in Ireland, and it's going to be, hopefully nice to see him fight in Ireland, and hope his, fans do come out for him. With him not having fought in the whole of Ireland, so since 2018, I think he fought in Northern Ireland, but he hasn't fought in Dublin in years and years. He spent a lot of time fighting in Dubai, kind of picking up wins that look good with the records of his opponents, but if you look deeper into their records, they're not really that tested opponents. And so again, he's been able to get himself kind of opportunities from doing that, but he's been able to fight pretty consistently-ish in Dubai, and he's also had fights all over. He's fought in America for his world title fight against Tevin Farmer. He's fought in Spain. He's fought, in Uzbekistan, I think. He really has fought all over. Of course, he has a more recent loss to the guy who Jazza Dickens just beat in Batyrgaziev. Carroll got stopped by him quite badly by just, real brutal bodywork. Of course, Carroll has fought for a world title, though, again, like I say, back again in 2019 against Tevin Farmer, the IBF title, and has a good win against Scott Quigg as well in 2020 to retire him. But even though he's been fighting for ages, he is only 33 years of age. He's been fighting since 2012 and had a lot of fights, but he is only 33 as well. So again, not really that old. And he's a southpaw test for Colm Murphy. So just a lot of different things for Colm Murphy, which I'm just not sure if he's going to be, able to deal with. Murphy isn't what you'd assume a boxer to look like, going under the name Posh Boy and kind of giving off that persona and that energy to an extent, but he's been progressing through the Irish ranks well, picking up the Commonwealth belt last time out as well, and he has a good win against Luke Pearson in Belfast, probably one of his more bigger wins. He beat Jack Turner on a Queensbury show as well, which again was alright, but again both of them guys haven't really been tested before fighting Murphy. It's just more of them like kind of competitive fights where they are for Irish belts, or the first kind of competitive fight before you then take a step up. He's 26 years of age, and if he wins this fight, it's a huge win for his career. But again, I don't know. Murphy's a good fighter, but I think this, like I say, in my opinion, will be too much for him at this point. He will probably show a good level of heart. I think he will definitely do that. He'll try go toe-to-toe with Carroll, but I believe Carroll will be able to move him, bully him, and control the fight, setting a high-tempo war-type fight throughout that Murphy just isn't used to. But I still think Carroll can be caught pretty often, and coming off his first stoppage defeats in his career, that might affect him. He got hurt badly to the body in that fight, and like I mentioned, it'll be a huge win for Murphy to be able to go out there and get, a stoppage, especially against Carroll. But I just don't see it happen. I think Carroll still has enough left to give, especially at the level in which I think Murphy's used to. Murphy, he could have gone on to fight for, I don't know if the British title would have been allowed for him as an Irish fighter, but I feel like there could have been a level before fighting Jono Carroll. Credit for him to taking the fight, but I think it's a very tough fight, and I'm going to have Jono Carroll winning via unanimous decision. I think this fight is going to probably prove that Murphy is a very tough fighter, can take a lot of punishment and keep coming, but when Murphy is fighting, he often is just kind of standing in front of you. He's very limited in, what he does. He sets a high output, but again, it's not really anything too crazy that I'm seeing from him. Jono Carroll isn't anything too crazy, but he's the more compact out of the two, I think, and like I say, just got more experience, more, going to be able to give more, use that aggressiveness, which I think he has over Murphy as well. And again, like I say, I think he's going to win a pretty comfortable unanimous decision, in my opinion, where, like I say, Murphy could get dropped at certain points, but just shows a lot of heart, in my opinion. And then we can go on to fight next. It would be a good win for Carroll to get back into winning ways, and comfortably get back into winning ways. Flores Jr. could be a good fight. He just fought Cordina. Tevin Farmer, again, could be a good fight that actually could possibly happen. I don't know if it would benefit Farmer much, but Farmer, he's just coming off multiple back-to-back losses, and his last one, of course, was the most brutal against Floyd Schofield, so that could be a good fight. Or Even having Gwyn could be a good fight as well. Gwyn got a draw against Cameron Vong after their rematch, so maybe they'll do a trilogy with them. But Matchroom might want to be moving Vong back down a level a little bit before they try and do anything like that. And Gwyn deserves a good fight again, so maybe something like that with a Jono Carroll. I really have no idea how his career is going to progress, and I never really have understood how his career has progressed so far. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.